Okay, so what we're going to look at now then is some of the traditional uses of heathland. So the primary one, and these are quite tightly related to the like method of management, to be honest. So we've got grazing, and this is by things like horses and cattle. What you find is different species of um, livestock have different mechanisms by which they graze the ground, and this can affect how the communities of plants respond. So things like horses or ponies eat things like grass, and they will sometimes also eat invasive bracken, which is really useful because not many other things will eat bracken. And they're heavy, so they will trample some things down. Cattle are very large and heavy, so they trample vegetation, and this can cause things like small areas of puddling, which is just where the hoof of the animal leaves an indent and that fills up with water. And that's really useful because you get organisms like sundew, which is a carnivorous plant, living on like just the edges of these sort of trampled areas. So you get these sort of special microclimates developing. And they also are really good at removing long, tough grass that other things don't really touch. So it helps manage all these things. But this was extensive grazing, which means low density. So you didn't have too many cattle in one place at any one time. The cutting for things like firewood, bedding for livestock, things like the bracken. Again, so another way we can control this invasive bracken. It's not an invasive species from outside of the UK or anything. It's just it would smother the heather and grass otherwise if it's not sort of exploited in some way or controlled. And then also for fodder, which means food for livestock for the winter. And then the burning, which results in this patchwork of heather ages. And this is important because, if I give myself a bit of space, if you've got young heather, the burning removes nutrients as well, actually. So it removes nutrients. The young heather is going to be surrounded by lots of bare patches of burnt ground, so you don't have it's very hot and sunny, so that's beneficial for certain communities of reptiles and insects to warm up. And as it develops and matures, it becomes more expansive and covers more of the area, and you start getting this sort of shady, humid like understory to it. And then as it gets really old, it'll start to die back and you get this degenerate heather. And each one has its own community of plants, insects, reptiles that you don't really find anywhere else. They're not very good dispersers. By having small patches, they're able to move between them and exploit different resources. So that's really important. So let's have a look at some of the threats to heathlands. So we've got urbanization and fragmentation. So quite often these heathlands you find sort of on the edge potentially of small urban areas or urban areas, and they could get built on. Fragmentation is where roads cut through as development increases, and that prevents sometimes animals from dispersing safely. You've got over burning on some areas, and this can increase the amount of grass, and you get less heather because it's done too frequently. You can get overgrazing. So we get additional nutrients from the manure from the animals, which causes grass to become more common in expense of the heather, and you get less, like the heather gets overgrazed, sort of killing it off because it's sort of preferentially grazed and trampled, and it can't cope with too much grazing pressure. You might have intensification of agriculture as well. And these things add things like fertilizer. So you get grasses outcompeting the heather again, which makes it more productive from a farming standpoint, but less valuable as a habitat for these sort of organisms. You also can have undergrazing, which sounds a bit strange, given I just said about overgrazing. But if you don't have a farmer who keeps a few cattle or horses on it, then this might mean that succession takes place, and we end up with woodland in place of the heathland. Overgrazing as well, something like sheep will graze the heather very heavily and prevent it from regenerating, and that will result in more grass as well. So sheep are a very need to be very closely managed if you're going to have them on a heathland. And you also get forestry. So this is where we have exotic softwood trees, things like Sika spruce. These are going to be planted to provide commercial timber. They're not native, so they don't really support the same diversity of species that you'd find from a native woodland. They're planted very closely together. You get things like fertilizers and drainage ditches built to help them grow as quickly as possible. So you end up these displacing or removing sort of the heathland habitat. And they were traditionally grown in places of low agricultural value, so that heathland definitely counts as that. So that's why you find big stands of sort of forestry commission type plantations on heathlands, or where heathlands once were, and therefore you lose that Plagioclimax community because you've lost that the abiotic factors that enabled it to survive. You get things like shading and it's too cold or that sort of thing.